Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Welcome back to the second part of my horror movie novelization collection. Now, before I get started, if you missed the first video and you're kind of wondering what a novelization is, I'm just going to briefly break that down for you so you can have a good idea of the books that I'm talking about. So, normally if a movie is inspired by a book, obviously the book has come first and the book has inspired that movie. Well, under this circumstance, a book didn't exist until the movie was released, and that's because the movie inspired the book, which was known as a novelization. And this came to be at a time when it was hard to get your hands on VHS tapes. It was expensive to purchase a VHS tape, and it was cheaper to buy a book. And even before then, if you wanted to see a movie, your only real options was either going to the theater or waiting for that movie to come on TV. And of course, when video rentals became a thing, it was a little bit easier to get your hands on the movie you wanted to see. Even still, there was a chance that video rental might not have the movie you wanted. So novelizations were a thing where for people who loved the movie that they saw, they could go out and buy the novelization and still be able to enjoy that movie over and over again by reading the book at an affordable rate. So that's pretty much what a novelization is. Anywho, even though I said this is going to be a part 1 of 2, I'm sure eventually in time there's going to be a part 3 because, as I said, I do enjoy collecting books, especially if they're vintage books, and if I can get my hands on a novelization that was inspired by a horror movie, I'm gonna try to do that, but I'm not going to spend anything outrageous for a novelization. And even though a lot of the books I'm about to show are out of print, of course you can still watch their movies on different streaming platforms or simply just buying the Blu-ray or DVD as we have easy access now. Before I show off this first book, I want to give everyone a little lesson about how good it is to be a patient person. So, I really wanted to read this during my childhood, but I didn't see it at any of the bookstores in town. As a matter of fact, the only place I ever saw it was at my elementary school library. And as I had mentioned to one of my classmates one day upon seeing this, I'm like, I'm going to check that book out. But at the same time, of course, there was this asshole in class who was a total bully to everyone. He had failed a few years and he picked on everyone who was smaller than him. And as soon as the librarian said we could get up from our desk and pick out the book we wanted to read, he shoved me out of the way, ran over to the shelf, and grabbed that book that I was just wanting so bad. Well, he went over to the librarian and checked it out. And I said, you know what? I'll just wait. He'll return it. I'll check it out then. Well, he returned it and he checked it out again. Then again. Then again. Then again. So on and so forth. She let him check it out beyond the amount of time that she would let anyone else check out a book. And eventually it just turned into the book never returning. So, yeah. Years pass, and because of me being an adult and having the internet at my fingertips, I was able to find the book that I wanted. And also, karma worked to my favor because I heard a couple of years ago he had the ever-loving living hell beat out of him. So, thank you, karma. But the book I'm talking about is Gremlins. Now, this was written by George Guype, and it is based on the screenplay by Chris Columbus, directed by Joe Dante, and produced by Steven Spielberg. Unfortunately, this is out of print, but if you have not seen the movie, the quick rundown of it is A young man receives this cute, cuddly little creature as a Christmas present from his dad, and he's told that with taking care of this creature, it comes a great responsibility. Like, he's not supposed to get it wet, he's not supposed to feed it after midnight, and he's not supposed to expose it to light, which of course he fails miserably. Now, with this, as you can tell here, there are some images inside. And what sets this apart for me is there are few novelizations I've come across where you have that nice little glossy paper inside that has color images on it. And for the most part, like, the images that I've seen in these books are just, black and white paper images. So for me, this adds a whole other level to it. And it's actually in really good condition. Like, the spine's not broken, I didn't have to tape anything together. And yeah, it's just something that I feel very satisfied by having. And even though I haven't read this yet, I have heard tell that an origin story is given on the Gremlins. I don't know how true that is, but supposedly the Gremlins are aliens. You know what? I'm all right with it. I would rather not have an origin story, but you know what? I'm still excited about everything. So this is definitely a book that I'm not going to part with. It's something that I do plan to read. I actually want to read it around Christmas since the movie took place at Christmas. So this will definitely make a fun holiday read. And since I'm a completist, of course, I would not be happy until I got Gremlins Part 2, The New Batch. I remember seeing this in theaters. Like, I loved it. I had a great time with it. And I remember just thinking, this is the best thing I have ever seen in my entire life. It was gross, it was fun, and I just absolutely loved it. And I didn't realize until later that a lot of audiences didn't like it. I don't know why, but hey, I enjoyed it, and that's all that matters in my opinion. But this one is about the characters of the first movie, Billy and his fiance at this point, I think. They've moved to New York, and it just so happens that the little mogwai known as Gizmo has found them. So, again, because of people being careless, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And yeah, I don't know if this is going to be as humorous as what the movie was. I just don't know if we're going to get that same campy cheesiness there, but if we do, it's fine. I absolutely love that humor. And unfortunately, this one doesn't really have anything special inside. There are no pictures. There's nothing on the back except just the synopsis. But of course, we have the original poster art. So that right there, love. Absolute love. Following that is a movie that I absolutely loved when I was a kid. I felt like it was a scary as hell ghost story, and it was actually my comfort movie for quite some time. But I'm talking about Poltergeist. And what's really cool about this novelization is it's actually in hardback, like, and it's in good condition too. So, yeah, I lucked up when I found this. I remember finding it at a used bookstore, and I was just like, what the hell? I cannot believe this. So, of course, I grabbed it up. It was for a great price, and the book is by James Caan. Now, this is a different James Caan who had his legs broken to hell and back by Kathy Bates and Misery. I know that because last name's spelled different. But this is based, of course, on the screenplay by Steven Spielberg, Michael Gross, I hope I'm saying that last name correct, and Mark Victor. So, if you are unfamiliar with Poltergeist, pretty much the story revolves around a family where the youngest child of that family is highly clairvoyant, and because of her presence in the particular house that they're living in, she wakes up the spirits of the land. And they abduct her to try to help them cross over. So, yeah, that movie was absolutely phenomenal. I remember as a kid just thinking to myself, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this before, which I was maybe 5 or 6, so I hadn't seen a lot at that time, but even still, there were a lot of very iconic moments in this movie. There were some great one-liners, and it's still one of my go-tos when I just want to have a nostalgic comfort watch. Now, I did see the remake, and it sucked. It sucked bad. So if you haven't seen this, definitely go for the original. Unfortunately, the book is out of print, but if you can get your hands on a copy for a reasonable price, why not? Also, while I was at this used bookstore, not only did I find Poltergeist, but almost in mint condition, I found Poltergeist Part 2, The Other Side. This is one of those circumstances where, as far as a movie is concerned, I enjoyed the sequel just as much as I did the first one. And I think that's mostly because the scares were original, it was very creative, and it gave me characters who I actually cared about. As far as the book goes, James Caan is the author of this again. If you haven't seen the movie, this follows the life of Carol Ann as she and her family have relocated to her grandmother's house. And not only have they moved, but the spirits have moved with them. And we get a better understanding of why everything has happened. Now, even though I really love part 1 and 2, part 3 was simply okay. I really wish that we could have stayed with her family and it not taken the move away from them. But I don't know if a novelization exists of Poltergeist 3. I haven't really looked around, but if it does, I would love to have a copy of it for my library. Of I'm not going to spend anything outrageous, but I am a completist, so it would be nice if a third book exists that it could go with its companions. Up next is the novelization of one of my favorite body horror movies, which that is Scanners by David Cronenberg, which was written and directed by him. Now, the book, though, was a novel that was written by Leon Whiteson, and for the most part, this book is in really good condition. Like, not bad at all. I mean, I only spent a few pennies on this at a yard sale, and as you can see, there is a little bit of sticker residue there. That's really my only complaint. I have tried to remove that, and a lot of it did come off, but then the cover started going with it. So at that point, it's on there pretty good and hard, and I just don't want to ruin this, so it's gonna stay as is. But if you have not seen Scanners, this is the movie about a group of people who had been experimented on, and because of those experiments, they now have mental powers where they can control the thoughts of other people, or they can cause a person to explode. And it has a really kick-ass battle at the end, so yeah, it's a lot of fun. And the movie is quite gory, just about with anything that's David Cronenberg. It's beautifully filmed, well acted, and you definitely have quite a few moments that are complete WTF. Like, if you're going to do Cronenberg, you know you are going to get it. You know you're going to get something that you have never seen before in anything else. So, even though this might be out of print, if you haven't seen the movie, definitely see the movie. Also, I know novelizations exist of Cronenberg's The Brood and Videodrome. I can't spend a lot for it, but if you know where I can get a reasonable copy, hook a brother up. Up next is another book that I found at a used bookstore. Obviously, if you can get to a used bookstore, get to a used bookstore. 9 out of 10 times they are going to be mom and pop, and you can find gold there. So seriously, go support them. Do that. Like, they need the support. And to be honest, I would much rather hunt at a mom and pop place rather than like going to eBay or something like that. Which, of course, if you go to a mom and pop place, you're probably going to find the book that you're looking for just a few dollars. Whereas online, that same book might be a few $100s. But anywho, the next book is a novelization that was inspired by the movie that was inspired by a graphic novel, which that is 30 Days a Night. Now, the novelization is written by Tim Levin, and the movie was written by Steve Niles, Stuart Beattie, and Brian Nelson, which the movie was inspired by the graphic novel by Stephen Niles and Ben Templesmith. And pretty much, I think you can still get your hands on this. Not too certain, I haven't looked into it. But this is the story about a location in Antarctica, just this small little place in Antarctica. And we have gone into the cycle where it is literally night for 30 days long. And this is when a group of vampires decides to attack everyone, and it becomes a game of who will survive and what will be left of them. So the concept's pretty simple. The movie was really great. I loved seeing it in theaters. It was good and gory. The vampires were completely ruthless. And it's just the perfect movie to enjoy on a winter's night. Which, of course, when I get ready to read this, it's definitely going to be in the winter. Now, I probably should have the graphic novel. I don't. But one of these days, I'd like to get my hands on it. Speaking of Tim Levin, this is another book that I was happy to get my hands on. I think it is still available, but this is the novelization of The Cabin in the Woods by Tim Levin. And this is based off of the screenplay by Josh Whedon and Drew Goddard. Now, this movie really took me by surprise. I went to go see it in theaters when it was released, and when I had seen the trailer, I thought that it was just going to be your basic cabin in the woods horror story. It wasn't going to be anything big and elaborate. Then when the twist was revealed, I was like, what the hell? What in the world? So I thoroughly enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, I think I saw it like 3 or 4 times in the theater. And yeah, I know some people absolutely hate this movie. I'm one of those geeks who love it. Um, if you have not had the opportunity to see it, I will try to avoid any big spoilers. I think just about everyone knows what to expect at this point. But pretty much it is a story about a group of college kids who get a cabin in the woods. And after reading from a diary, things go horribly wrong. So, yeah, if you're a big horror fan, you can watch this movie and see a lot of different nods to a lot of different horror classics. And I think that was part of the fun watching this, was to say, oh, well, that's from, oh, check that out. That's from, and so, yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And this is something that I feel would probably be a good read for the summer. Following that is a novelization that I purchased simply because I was there, it was there, and I had a few extra dollars to spend at the used bookstore. But this is the novelization of The Legacy. And this was written by John Cohn, based on the story by Jimmy Sangster. And of course, it's out of print. But the last time I saw this, I was a kid. And I just remember thinking it was okay. This was one of those circumstances where the cover of the movie, which is the same as what you see here, pulled me into wanting to watch it. And from what I can remember, it was like about 6 or 7 people who went to this old mansion, and they got picked off one by one until there was like the final girl, I think it was, and she was the one who inherited everything. But if I remember right, it was a cult based. I can't necessarily remember. I do have the movie on DVD. I just haven't watched it. And I'm sure once I do watch it, I might feel differently about it now than when I was a kid. I think maybe I was a little too immature to enjoy this at the age that I was. So I'm probably going to read the book before I revisit the movie. So hopefully I'll enjoy it better this time around. Up next is a novelization that was inspired by one of my favorite video nasties, which is Dead and Buried. And as you can tell, this was written by Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough, and it was inspired by the manuscript from the creators of Alien, who are Dan O'Bannon and Robert Shusett. Now, getting your hands on the book is somewhat hard to do, but watching the movie is pretty easy. And as a matter of fact, I think it's on Shudder at the moment. Could be wrong about that. But the story focuses on a small seaside village known as Potter's Bluff, and as the community has been terrorized by a string of murders, the sheriff starts investigating, only to find that some of the victims who have died are still walking around. So this is a fun movie for Friday or Saturday night. It's something that really shouldn't be taken seriously. It's not that professionally done, even though it is a very fun movie. And yeah, I mean, it does obviously have its flaws that fit into the whole midnight screening sort of deal. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it and you want some gore, definitely check this out. And speaking of Dan O'Bannon and Robert Shusett, next up on the list is Alien, which this book was written by Alan Dean Foster, and believe it or not, this is actually pretty easy to get your hands on. Like, the last time I checked, it's still available in print, ebook, and audio. And if you have been living under a rock and don't know what to expect from this sci-fi horror classic, it follows 7 astronauts as they are going across the galaxy, and they get a distress call from a planet, which, after they investigate, they accidentally bring something back onto the ship with them, which begins picking off everyone one by one until we are given the final girl. Following that book is another novelization that's still pretty easy to get your hands on, which I'm talking about Aliens, which was written by Alan Dean Foster, and it was inspired by the manuscript from James Cameron. Now, this is a sequel that I felt like was just as good as the original as far as movies are concerned, and it does continue to follow the life of the final girl from its predecessor, known as Ripley, as she goes back to battle more aliens. Also, we get introduced to a whole new cast of characters who I felt like I was more invested with, and I really did love the Newt character and wish that she could have continued on with the series. But this was pretty badass in my opinion. I still haven't read the book, but I absolutely love the Queen Alien that we were given. I love the whole robotic suit that Ripley was in as she battled the Queen, and I can't wait to see how that's depicted in the book. And again is another novelization that's easy to get your hands on, which this is Alien 3. And again, this is written by Alan Dean Foster, and this was based on the screenplay by David Giler and Walter Hill, as well as Larry Ferguson. Now, out of the Alien movies, I still did enjoy this one quite a bit. I know a lot of fans didn't really care for it, or at least the fans I've spoken to haven't really cared for it. And I didn't see any problem with it except for the fact that Newt did not continue with the storyline. I really hate what happened to her. And this one actually takes place in a prison setting where Ripley has been apprehended, and once again, she is faced with battling off the aliens and just trying to live to see another day while trying to convince everyone that they are in danger, but of course, no one's really listening. Again, I have another novelization that's easy to get your hands on, and that is Alien Resurrection, which this one was written by A.C. Crispin, and it was inspired by the movie written by Josh Whedon. Now, I enjoyed this movie as well. Again, audiences were pretty divided with it, I believe. And I remember seeing this in theaters and just thinking to myself, okay, what are we going to be given that's new that I hadn't seen before? And I was pleasantly surprised, especially with what happened to Ripley. And I just thought it was a lot of fun. There were actually moments in it that made my heart pound, especially when the aliens were getting after them. So, yeah, totally a fan of all of the movies, some more than others, so I can't wait to actually read the books. Up next is a novelization that when it was released again, I had to slam down money for it because growing up, this was one of my all-time favorite horror movies. As a matter of fact, I love the sequel just as much. The remake was it was what it was. I felt like they cut out a lot of the gay tones that was in the original, which took away a lot from the story for me. But anywho, I'm talking about the 80s classic Fright Night. And this was inspired by the screenplay written by Tom Holland, which I'm speaking about the horror master Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man twink Tom Holland. And this was adapted into novel format by Craig Spector and John Skip, which it makes sense that they would be the ones to create the novelization, as I've heard they are splatterpunk authors, and I have been intending to read them. But as far as the movie goes, I remember when I saw it for the first time, my mind was blown because I had never really seen a horror movie at that time that had commented on gay lifestyle or bisexual lifestyle the way that this movie did. And I felt like I could relate to the characters. I felt like it was definitely something that was punk, which I loved. And I just love the whole oddball society that this movie presented, such as everyone being just completely sorted. But anywho, I felt like this was a really fun adaptation of the age-old story of Dracula that had been brought into a modern suburban setting where a young boy named Charlie is just nonstop harassed by his neighbor Jerry, who is a vampire, where Jerry eventually tries to move in on Charlie's girlfriend because she is a reincarnation of one of his past lovers. And yeah, the movie has strong gay and bisexual vibes throughout it. As a matter of fact, some of the casts that were included are a part of LGBTQ+. So yeah, I truly, truly admire how the original was done. I wish that we could have got more than two movies out of the series. I understand why they didn't continue forward, which sucks. But yeah, when I want to pull out a classic vampire movie and show my friends something that they probably hadn't seen before, Fright Night is always my go-to. Following that is the novelization by Jeff Roven known as Reanimator. And this was based off of the screenplay that was written by Dennis Paoli. I hope I'm saying that correct. Dennis Paoli, William J. Norris, and Stuart Gordon, which I am a huge Stuart Gordon fan. I hate that he's no longer with us. But yeah, when you see a Stuart Gordon movie, you know you're going to get some gross outs. You know you're going to get some shit that you had never seen before. And in my opinion, this horror movie still has one of the best head scenes ever. But For those of you who are familiar with the name Reanimator, this was based off of the short stories by H.P. Lovecraft, which had originally been written as a serial. And this is where we get our iconic character known as Herbert West, which getting your hands on a copy of the book and movie are equally easy to do. And if you are unfamiliar with this, it is about a student who is dedicated to bringing back dead material so they can be animate once again. And it's very sci-fi horror. It's very grotesque horror. It's just a lot of fun, a whole lot of fun. As a matter of fact, I ended up enjoying The Bride of the Reanimator just as much as I did this one. And of course, I think Lovecraft probably would have rolled over in his grave to see what was done with his story, which I don't care. Lovecraft can do spin cycles for all I care. But this was a lot of fun. Haven't read the book yet, but I'm hoping that it's just as grotesque as what the movie was. I feel like the movie is a great example of a horror film that's done correctly by just its lighting, its atmosphere. And I really feel like this was a movie where when I saw it, it just felt like the rot wafted off of the screen. So, yeah, definitely check that out. So, I had fully intended just to do 2 horror movie novelization videos and end it at that. But I do still have a few other books that I want to brag about and show off, so for that reason, I'm going to do a 3rd video next week. And this 3rd video should wrap everything up. But I might just label the video as PS more horror movie novelizations, or I might go back and edit the thumbnails of the previous videos where it's like part 1 of 3, part 2 of 3, all of that good stuff. So I'll just think about that and do it when it happens. But yeah, that's all of the novelizations that I'm going to show off in this episode. And definitely be sure to check out the next episode that I'll have up next week. But now that we're at the end of this video, I would like to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if there is a certain profession you would like for me to tie to your name, just let me know and I'll do that. Also, I do have a $10 tier available, where for $10 a month, I'll still give you the shout out as you see here, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I send out one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off and do whatever you like with it. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can continue to have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram are all available in the description section of this episode. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell, because I do have book reviews and more videos coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.